These are big times in America, and we do want to start, of course, by calling some attention to the devastation in the Southeast. The Helene
Hmm.
death toll climbs as Southeast digs out from storms. Devastation. Cleanup is underway after powerful Hurricane Helene wreaked havoc across the U.S. Southeast, killing at least 63 people across multiple states, left hundreds stranded without shelter, and more than 2.5 million customers without power from Florida to Ohio. The storm crashed ashore in Florida's Big Bend area on Thursday night as a dangerous Category 4 storm. Despite weakening to a post-tropical cyclone, Helene was still causing catastrophic historic flooding in the southern Appalachians late Friday night, the National Hurricane Center said. Helene was expected to hover over the Tennessee Valley on Sunday, the Hurricane Center said. High wind warnings also covered parts of Tennessee and Ohio. I am deeply saddened by the loss of life and devastation caused by Hurricane Helene across the Southeast, read a statement released on Saturday from President Biden. The road to recovery will be long, but know that my administration will be with you every step of the way for the next 5 months until we're not an administration anymore. We're not going to walk away. We're not going to give up. Although I have a feeling if Kamala wins, she's going to keep like all the same people. I think
Yeah,
there's going to
no,
be a lot of
she,
continuity. Yeah.
she has to because she's completely incompetent on her own, and she doesn't even have her own staffers. She hemorrhaged like what 49 of them or 40 of them.
Yeah, I think it's basically going to be they're going to switch the boss out and leave everybody else in place. So maybe in that sense, he's right.
Yeah.
More than 2.68 million customers in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia were without power Saturday night, according to utility tracker Find Energy. At least 62 people across multiple states were killed during Hurricane Helene. A spokesperson for Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said 17 people were killed in the state. A first responder was amongst the dead. Kemp said earlier on Friday. In South Carolina, 23 people died from the storm, officials confirmed to CBS News. The deaths include 2 firefighters and 2 people who were killed when trees fell on residences. The National Weather Service Saturday reported the highest rainfall totals from Helene for each state. The rural northwest North Carolina area of Busick has received the highest overall rainfall, with a staggering 30.78 inches so far. Sumatra, located in Florida's Big Bend region, recorded 15.91 inches of rain, while Tallulah in northeast Georgia received 14.22 inches. South Carolina's Table Rock, 14.34. Helene made landfall about 10 miles west of Perry, Florida at 11:10 p.m. on Thursday, according to the Hurricane Center, with maximum sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. Meteorologist Stephanie Abrams of the Weather Channel said on CBS Mornings Friday that Helene is the 4th hurricane to make landfall in the Gulf Coast this year, which had happened only 5 other times in history. Helene is the 3rd hurricane to hit the Big Bend region in the last 13 months. In 2023, Hurricane Idalia, a Category 4 storm with maximum sustained winds of 130 miles per hour, generated a record-breaking storm surge from Tampa to the Big Bend. Last August, Hurricane Debbie also hit the area. The early reports we've received is that the damage in those counties that were really in the eye of the storm has exceeded the damage of Idalia and Debbie combined, DeSantis told reporters in a news conference on Friday. Mr. Biden has issued emergency declarations for Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee, all of which free up federal resources that will go towards recovery and assistance efforts. More than 800 FEMA personnel have been deployed to the region, the White House said. The Gulf Coast community of Keaton Beach, Florida, which I never even knew existed.
Hey,
funny.
Where's your royalty check?
Exactly. Yeah, no one ever told me there was a Keaton Beach. Was still recovering from Idalia and Debbie when Helene appeared to deliver the knockout punch. Taylor County officials estimate 90% of homes in Keaton Beach are gone. The storm surge shoved buildings off their foundations. Linda Wickler lost the restaurant she's owned for 20 years. She seemed more shaken by what she saw across her village, homes torn apart by the wind and the deep water. If you let it play with your mind, you just can't go there, Wicker said. You can't. It's horrible. There's a lot of folks that don't have a place to go, have nothing, no money, no home, no nothing. So we got to work to help them too, Wicker said. Wow. Record warm water in the Gulf almost certainly acted like jet fuel in intensifying the storm. Brian McNulty, senior research associate at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine, Atmospheric, and Earth Science, recently noted that ocean heat content in the Gulf of Mexico is the highest on record, warm water is a necessary ingredient to strengthen tropical systems. Sea surface temperatures in the path of Helene were as warm as 89 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 to 4 degrees above normal. These record water temperatures have been made significantly more likely by human-caused climate change, according to Climate Central. The North Atlantic Ocean as a whole has seen record warm temperatures in 2024, storing 90% of the excess heat from climate change produced by greenhouse gas pollution. And here is a chart referenced here by the man quoted in the article. The ocean heat content averaged over the Gulf of Mexico is obliterating previous all-time record highs, 126% of average for the date. As you can see, the red line above the blue bell curve there. So obviously, hearts go out to everybody in that region. Right. It seems to me, and Jake, you're the science guy, you are the climate man, so feel free to turn your mic on and correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems as though it's an unusual pattern for a hurricane to go up inland, because as I understand, hurricanes feed off of the warm water on the coast, so they usually roll up the coast. This seems to be rolling up inland, like western North Carolina is amongst the most heavily impacted places. It seems like a very unusual path for a hurricane, the fifth this year to originate in the Gulf Coast. I guess the warm water is a cause of that, but it just seems, the devastation seems so widespread.
Right. I don't know if he's going to chime in, but he said,
I got it. He says I'm right, so that's good to know.
Okay. Yeah, because if we look at the warm waters, I mean, all it is transferring energy, and that's what these hurricanes are. But even now, scientists are even considering making a new category that's going to be a step above a category 5, which, think about the amount of energy it takes for these hurricanes to go inland, because they normally don't do that. And again,
right.
Even when they get closer, they lose their strength. So this should tell every one of us that not only is the climate significantly getting warmer, but there are factors that need to be taken into account here of just how continuous this will be. And if these are ongoing situations, and dare we see it, maybe a category 6 approaching, and then what? A category 5 is inland, or they keep on going higher and higher in the amount of energy because the waters are getting warmer. This will be a devastating series of events for the cities and other outlying towns that are in the path of these potential hurricanes, to which they might not ever truly be recovered from. And are we looking at people doing a mass exodus from these regions? I mean, there's a lot of scenarios in which local, state, and federal authorities are not truly prepared for. And since the United States doesn't invest into its infrastructure, we're looking at a lot of people who could be potentially homeless. And I saw a couple people in the live stream chat bring up the fact of, are the homeless people being counted in for the death toll as well? Because, we have residents, we have homes, and if people do die in those residential areas, they're going to be counted. But what about the people who have absolutely nothing to their name? I mean, this is just devastating. Plus, we're lucky we're live streaming on Rumble, because Rumble was in the pathway of that hurricane.
Rumble was in the pathway of the hurricane, absolutely. You also had, just a huge band of these inland communities. There was a prison. I mean, you talk about, is everybody safe? There was a mandatory evacuation zone near the panhandle of Florida where everybody left, but a lot of prisoners were left behind. And, you see those coastal communities, which are considered at risk now that these storms seem to be intensifying. But what if these storms start tearing up the inland areas too? Mm-hmm. I mean, that creates, a whole nother band of communities that could potentially be at increased risk, which means you have to make necessary infrastructure tweaks, shall we say, to put it mildly, because it doesn't look like the weather patterns are going to be reversed at this point. And so maybe extra preparation is called for.
And dare I say it, maybe a more mass exodus of people looking for higher ground to be safe from these potential storms. But, while it's not related, and I know it's a completely different kind of environment, but even Chicago's been hit with a couple of these massive thunderstorms that I wouldn't say are hurricane equivalent, because they're not. But, there's been this strange wave of absolutely devastating storms and tornadoes. And what does this mean for the long term for not only our economy, but for our ecology, our society, and everything else? I mean, the United States isn't ready for this because we haven't done anything to invest in the people or the nation. And
that's
Mother Nature doesn't really give a damn how we feel.
That is another point. We haven't had a serious infrastructure project to sort of prep for this. I would imagine, Jake, tell me if I'm wrong again, I would imagine that moisture in the ground, water levels, in inland communities might affect it. I mean, I always understood hurricanes and these storms fed on water. So I would imagine the wetter the season, the more potential there is even inland for them to rise up, in just sort of an inland band. Again, I don't know any of this all that well. That's just my hypothesis. Jake, you turn on your mic. Go ahead.
Yeah, the basics there is the hot water. Like as the temperatures rise, the water gets hotter too. More evaporation, more humidity. That water goes up and it has to come back down. So
Got it.
More rain. It's a little more complicated than that because like the dry places are going to stay dry because that's evaporating off, and water is going to fall sooner. So the wet places get wetter, the dry places get drier as well.
What could go wrong?
Well, thank you for that, Jake. That's Jake's showing you guys his voice and his talents, and so thank you for sharing that knowledge with us. And say hello in the chat if you're watching from any of these affected areas. Obviously, we had the Motley Jew, our friend Dan Richmond, call in from his RV in Central Florida. He's since been shit posting on Twitter, so I assume he is safe and sound. But everyone else, shout out in the chat. Shout us out in the chat to let us know you're okay. And obviously, best wishes to everybody in the path of this.
Please clap.